Ready for Mr. Berry. Sir, would you introduce yourself? Tell us your name and DOC number.
Brian Barrett, 310295.
Thank you. And counsel, would you introduce yourself, please, for the record?
Good afternoon, Emily Lubin here on behalf of Mr. Berry, and if I could reserve my remarks till the end.
Yes, thank you very much. Let me acknowledge the folks you have there with you, and at the penitentiary in support is Isaac Wilson, Marcus Wilson, Keandre Judson, Henry Davis, and Tiffany Davis. Also Aquelia Berry and Nancy Parker, both of them will be speaking on your behalf. We have the Parole Project also who will be speaking on Zoom. And then we have Joseph Landix also on Zoom. Here with us in Baton Rouge, we do have opposition. We have Kevin Berry. Kevin Evans, Kayla Evans, Stephanie Evans, Sharonda Biley, and a representative from the DA's office in East Baton Rouge, Ms. Tracy Barbera, who will also be speaking at the appropriate time. We'll ask for their comments. First, let me just read some identifying information in the record, Gary, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Roche. Your case has been assigned to him. So, Mr. Berry, you're here this afternoon seeking a commutation of your sentence. You have a sentencing date in April of 1996 in the 19th Judicial District, East Baton Rouge Parish, to a life sentence for a second-degree murder. There's also a 1999 sentencing date, 3 counts, secondary kidnapping, 3 counts of second-degree kidnapping, 40 years on each count. Those are running concurrent. Is that information correct, Mr. Berry?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, would you answer Mr. Roche, please?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Barry, Ms. Lubin, how are you?
Good morning, sir.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Madam Chairman, fellow board members, we have Brian Jerome Berry, DOC number 310-295. Offender Berry is here this afternoon seeking a recommendation for a commutation of sentence for a 1996 conviction for second-degree murder in the murder of Mr. Kevin Evans at his Baton Rouge home in the early morning hours of September 14, 1994. On March 15, 1996, Mr. Berry was found guilty by a jury of his peers as charged with second-degree murder. It was sentenced to life and hard labor at DOC without benefit of probation, parole, or suspension and sentence. In the same proceedings, Mr. Berry was convicted of 3 counts of aggravated kidnapping and was sentenced to life on each count to run concurrently with each other and concurrent with the second-degree murder conviction. After a series of appeals to the First Circuit Court of Appeals and the Louisiana Supreme Court, the conviction for the 3 counts of aggravated kidnapping was vacated and sent back to the trial court. On September 1999, the charges were amended in a plea deal, and Mr. Berry pled guilty to the amended charges of second-degree kidnapping. Judge Richard Anderson resentenced Mr. Berry to 40 years on each count to run concurrent and to run concurrent with the second-degree murder conviction. The first 20 years of the sentence was without benefits. Mr. Barry has served almost 29 years in his current sentence and is currently parole eligible on only the second-degree kidnapping conviction. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I found this on the web for who is currently pro-eligible.
Mr. Barry is currently 51 years old. At the time of this offense, he was 22 years of age. He will be incarcerated for 29 years as of next month. Mr. Barry, tell this panel this afternoon exactly what happened at 3035 Duke Street in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in the early morning hours of September 14, 1994. But before you tell us
Yes, sir.
exactly what happened at that residence, tell us about the night before, 80 miles away, when you were convinced by Dwight Eames to go to Baton Rouge and help him to bring back some of his belongings to New Orleans because he was moving back to New Orleans. Am I correct on all of that?
Yes, sir.
Tell me how he convinced you to make a round trip from New Orleans to Baton Rouge and back to help him to pick up some clothes.
Well, Mr. Roche, it didn't take much for him to convince me to take the ride with him. I didn't have no problem taking the ride with him for the simple reason we were, hanging out that night. I was out by one of my friends' house. And when he asked me, I didn't have anything else to do because I was running the streets at that time. So when he asked me, I had no problem with it.
So you made the trip to Baton Rouge along with some other guys, right?
Yes, sir.
And one of those guys was going to see his grandmother. Am I correct?
No, sir.
Right.
He was already by his grandmother.
Okay.
So he wasn't one of the guys that was there until after the crime, we picked him up.
So when did you find out that you planned to rob the house at 3035 Duke Street?
I found it out after I got to Baton Rouge and was by DeWitt's house, DeWitt's apartment. I was in the back seat of the vehicle on the way there, and I didn't hear everything that was going on because the music was playing, sir.
Okay. And you were one of the persons that was standing at the front door when they blew the horn, right?
Yes, sir, I was.
Why did you agree to do that?
Sir, I was stupid. I mean, I wasn't a clear thinker.
Were you the person that pushed or demanded that the wife and the children go into the bathroom and put them in the bathtub?
Sir, that was me. I didn't push the family, but I did bring them into the bathroom down the hall.
So tell me exactly what happened.
Okay, we went to Mr. Evans' house. When Mr. Evans came to the door, we brought him back in at gunpoint into a room where his wife and 2 kids were at. I gathered the kids and the wife and I led him down the hallway until we went to the bathroom, and I put him in the bathroom, sir. After being there for a minute, there was gunshots. I panicked, I shut the door, and I ran back outside because it wasn't supposed to be in no gunshots.
How long did you stay in the back seat before everybody else came out?
They came out, I'm talking about right after me. It wasn't long at all, sir.
So what did you do after that?
We got back in the car and we took off. And we stopped by a building, a school or something like that, and switched cars out.
Everything was planned ahead of time.
Yes, sir.
So exactly what did you do when you got back to New Orleans?
Well, that night or that morning, I recall going home to my apartment, and I sat up in there for a little while. And now, correct me, let me correct myself. Are you talking about before I wound up going back to Baton Rouge?
Okay,
I
for
wanna-
what? For what?
wound up going back to Baton Rouge because we didn't go straight back to New Orleans. We stopped in Covington or somewhere to pick up his roommate.
And
His
then you
roommate, we picked his roommate up.
backtracked and went back to Baton Rouge.
And went back to Baton Rouge to the Witt's apartment. Yes, sir.
And what did you do in Baton Rouge?
Well, first we sat there and we watched the news. We waited for the news that came on. And DeWitt had to bring his roommate to work, which I didn't know exactly where, but it was called Port Allen. And we all got in the vehicle, in DeWitt's vehicle, and brought his roommate to Port Allen to his job, a hotel or something.
And that's when you discussed what y'all had done. When it came on
Yes.
TV.
Yes.
Last question I have for you at this moment.
Yes, sir.
One of your last convictions was for obstruction of justice and contempt of court. You refused to testify in Mr. Eames' trial. Why would you refuse to testify? What happened?
I was taking the instructions of my attorney. Said I would be in my best interest. And I went along.
That's why you turned in not to testify that you were not, that you did not shoot. Mr. Evans was shot by DeWitt Eames. Were you offered a plea deal for your testimony?
No, sir.
You were not offered any plea deal in turn for your testimony.
No, sir.
Had you had your trial already?
Yes, sir.
And you were found guilty.
Yes, I was, sir.
But you just refused to testify based on the advice of your attorney.
That's correct, sir.
Our position in this case comes from the East Baton Rouge Parish District Attorney's Office. We have a very strong statement of opposition submitted by the first assistant DA, Tracy Barbera of the East Baton Rouge Parish DA's office. The East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office is opposed, and the Chief of Police of Baton Rouge, Louisiana is opposed. All three of the surviving victims. Mr. Kevin Evans' wife, son, and daughter are all adamantly opposed to any clemency for Mr. Berry. And all are present in the hearing room and will make statements at a later time. Mr. Berry has a low risk assessment. He's housed in minimum custody. He has a good institutional record and very positive remarks by the staff. He's earned a GED in 2001, CPR training, and he's currently on the CPR team. He's on a waiting list for CDL training. Have you got into the program yet?
No, sir, I'm still waiting.
Okay. He's completed 100 hours pre-release, living in balance, anger management, Malachi dads, inside out dads, thanking for a change, basic life support training, victim awareness, and he's done the victim accountability letter training. He belongs to the Veterans Club. And as I said before, he's a member of the CPR team. He's completed multiple faith-based programs. Mr. Barrett, would you like to mention any other programs or organizational participation that you have that I did not mention?
No, sir.
Mr. Barry has 4 adult arrests and multiple juvenile arrests on his record, but all the juvenile arrests were misdemeanors. He had 7 or 8 arrests as a juvenile. Why so much turmoil? Why so much trouble with law enforcement as a juvenile? What kind of problems did you have? Was it drugs, alcohol, a bad home environment? What was it?
Sir, I would have to say that it was the way I was, just never had any leadership. My parents, my mother worked, my brother was a little older than me, and I turned to the streets for support. I turned to the streets for thanking the people, my friends.
Was your brother in any trouble with the law?
Yes, sir. But at that time, there were certain times in my life my brother was there, and there were certain times that he wasn't.
Disciplinary conduct, Mr. Barry has 7 disciplinary write-ups in 29 years. The last one was in March of 2000, more than 23 years ago. And yes, I do see the write-up on April 29, 2017, involving your wife at a banquet. And I'm going to give you a mulligan on that one, and that's all I'm going to say about that write-up. But I do recognize that you had a write-up on April, 29, 2017. But
Yes, sir.
we won't discuss that. Now, your overall disciplinary conduct is very good. You only have 6 Class B write-ups in 29 years, excluding that unauthorized area in the other write-up. I didn't see any signs of drug abuse or alcoholism in the records. Have you ever had an issue with drugs or alcohol?
No, I haven't, sir.
You've never got no write-up while incarcerated for intoxication or contraband involving drugs?
No, sir.
I see your transition plan is with the initial transition plan is with the Louisiana Parole Project. And then with your wife on Wood Glen Drive in Baton Rouge, and you have an employment plan with homes, building materials on the airline highway in Baton Rouge. Tell us a little bit about the plan that you have if and when you're released.
Well, like you said first, sir, I would go to the parole project. And
How
after
long,
being,
how long do you anticipate being at the parole project?
well, the shortest amount of time that they see fit for me, because like I say, I have a residence plans with my wife. But whatever I have to go through with the program, I'm willing, and I'm gonna go through it with them, however long it may take.
And what is your job at the building supply company?
I will be working on the lumber yard, sir, out on the yard. And once I'm able to obtain my CDLs, whether in here or out there, I will start driving for this company.
So tell this panel this afternoon why we should commute your sentence.
Well, sir, I come to prison with no education, no job. I didn't listen to law enforcement, but I've matured in the 29 years I've been here. My record shows that I listen, I follow directions, I have a job, I've maintained a job. I'm not the person that I was. I want to do right, and my record shows that I'm capable of doing right. And I'm just not that same person that I was. I've matured.
Warden Falgood, do you have any comments, concerns, remarks, observations at this time?
Yes, just briefly, January of 18, he attained his Class A trustee status, worked for us as a road walker, brief time in the plumbing shop, then worked as a BOQ orderly, and lastly, the last looks to be a little over a year maybe now, he has been working as an orderly at our EMS department.
Thank you, Warden Falgood. Madam Chairman, I do have a recommendation in this case, and I will share it with my fellow board members at the conclusion of this interview.
Thank you, Mr. Redshine. All right, we'd like to hear from the support. Could we hear from Mrs. Berry, Mr. Berry's wife?
Good morning, my name is Anquilla Berry. I would like to address my support with my husband, Brian Berry. I would like to express my remorse to the Evans family. We will be praying for, continue to pray for this family. I would like to, when I met Brian, I observed him closely, and I recognized he was a positive and respectful, caring person. He carried himself with integrity. He is a great father figure, and he's great to his children. He takes responsibility and displays maturity now. I honestly say that Brian has started his rehabilitation way before I came in the picture. I can't take the credit for it. He takes his incarceration very seriously. I humbly ask if this board would give me the opportunity to support my husband upon his release. He will go to the parole project and complete all of the services that he is required, that this board would require him to do. And I am willing to support him financially, spiritually, physically. I have another vehicle for him to get back and forth to work and all the programs that y'all have for him to have. I just pray that this board would just give him the opportunity on the outside to show himself who he is now. And thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your remarks. Mrs. Nancy Parker.
Yes. Yeah. I thank the board for allowing me the opportunity to speak for my son. I gotta say, I love my son so much. I want to express my deepest sympathy for the family of the victims. I know
Thank you, ma'am.
I made a lot of mistakes, and I was not there for them. Sometimes, because when I worked different shifts. There was no one there to check on them for me. And so I had to do what I had to do. When we lived where there was no bus transportation and I got off at 11 o'clock, I had to go to my parents' house and come home in the morning. My son has changed so much. He has changed and matured so much. And I can just see that he could be something in life and to help other. It could be an inspiration to other young men that have gone astray, because what happened was he was looking for friendship and he chose the wrong path. And I can't forgive him because I chose the wrong path. And all I can say is I ask forgiveness, and I just pray that the board will allow him another chance to help and be an inspiration to someone else. Brian and his wife, they have a lovely relationship. They even do Bible studies together, on the phone, and when she comes to see him. And Brian is very good with his hands, and he catches on. And that's what happened. He caught on to the wrong thing because he was exposed to the wrong thing, but he has made a change in his life. And I believe that he's confessed what happened. And the only thing he can do is to ask the family for forgiveness. But he's gone to his God and asked him forgiveness. And we ask the board to consider just giving him another chance at being on the outside and inspiring someone else's life, because I know he can. And I just say,
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for your remarks. And we have Joseph Landis.
Good evening. I have known Mr. Berry for about 18 years. A lot of great things has been said about him, but I would like to speak to one thing that I've personally seen of many. In the year of 2011, while housed at Camp C in Bear 3 Dormitory, which was a trustee dormitory, there was a long-term offender by the name of Herbert Tarzan. Herbert Tarzan served 54 years of incarceration. At that time, Mr. Tarzan went into cardiac arrest. Myself and numerous other offenders in the dormitory stood there in awe. We were baffled. We didn't know what procedure to apply. Someone went and got Mr. Berry off of the yard, off of the iron pile. He came in and provided CPR. That resuscitation saved Mr. Herbert Tarzan's life. Unfortunately, 2 years ago, Mr. Tarzan died after serving 54 years of incarceration. Mr. Tarzan was Mr. Berry's friend. He would take him to visit with him. He would take him wherever it needed to be. Whatever Mr. Tarzan needed, Mr. Berry provided for him out of friendship. That is a testament to the character, compassion, and charity of Mr. Berry. Indeed, one bad moment in a person's life does not define every other moment in their life. We have all made mistakes. However, the rehabilitative programs offered by the Department of Corrections, they offer a silver lining of hope. They show us that if the offender applies themselves, they can change. However, it's important to understand that in order for a human being to be rehabilitated, they must first be habilitated. Mr. Berry has been habilitated. As a reflection of such habilitation, his jacket adequately reflects phenomenal rehabilitation. Mr. Berry is a phenomenal person, and I pray that this board take into consideration all of his collective embodiment of work and factor that into making their decision. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And the Pro Project.
Yes, good afternoon. Kerry Myers with Louisiana Parole Project. I don't want to go over everything everyone has already said about Mr. Berry. It's the reasons why we believe in him as a client. However, we are prepared to offer him our services. After 29 years plus of incarceration, we know that they will directly benefit him. Mr. Berry also has a stable long-term environment with his wife. He has employment, homes building materials. We have multiple clients employed at homes, which has been a great opportunity for those clients. Several of them have been promoted since they've been there. It's a good work environment. And Mr. Berry said once he gets his CDL, he'll be able to go from the yard to driving for him. And we know that is something that is very reachable. We would just ask this board to look at the support systems that he has, the programs that he has completed, his remorse for his own actions. He's not the 22-year-old who made a bad decision to hang out with some friends. He's not a follower anymore. You can see through his record, he's a leader, and he's done those things to establish himself as such. So we would just ask this board to look at it in its totality and grant him a recommendation of 60 years.
All right, thank you. Now we'll hear from the opposition. I'll let you all decide who goes first. Yes. To the podium. Yes. You're Kevin.
I want to be seen now. Well, I would first like to say, how would it be for me to see him anywhere like at Crawfish Festival or a Saints game? Like, how would that be? And this is a man that was supposed to kill me, my mama, and my sister, and kill my dad. Okay? And then his wife contacted me through Facebook, and he called me on three-way, and he told me that his cousin was the one that killed my dad. So that's not remorse. That's not, that was a couple of years ago. So I don't see that as remorse. Like I can't, like, my mama tell me that in order for me to get to heaven that I have to forgive him. Well, right now I hate him because he took everything from me. I had to grow up. I hear his mom saying how he had to grow up with nobody, but I had to grow up to be a man myself. I had to watch my mom and my sister go through hell every time of the year where it's his birthday. So, it's not easy. And then he's gonna live in the same city where we live in? Like, come on. Please, I've been having to be a man of this family for 29 years, since I was 10 years old. I was a little boy. When I asked him to give him money to save my daddy, he told me bad words. Sit down, So I can never forgive that. And if it was any one of y'all would forgive me if y'all was in my shoes. Because me and my family are not supposed to be here. And that's the only reason he's forgiven, because he got caught. You're not forgiving what you did. You wish every day that you could have might have took us out. So we couldn't say that because y'all came there to kill us with no masks. You don't come to nobody's house with no masks for them to live, man. You come there for to kill everybody else.
And my daddy started fighting to save us, and that's why we here today. Because my daddy fought for us to be here, not because he was gonna kill us. And I know it, I looked him in his eyes. That's why when he called me and said that it's cousin did it, you can't tell me that. I looked you in your eyes, you was the dude that told me, shut the F up, little B word. So I can't, like I said, I can't forgive him. I never will. And maybe I will one day, but as I'm a young man right now, I cannot. He's still a young man. I can still see him out in the streets. So I can't forgive him. And that's just all I have to say. I really can't say too much.
Thanks. Thank you for being here. Ms. Kayla?
Kayla Evans, at the time my daddy was murdered, it was no mistake. There was no, I was too young. My daddy was young too. I was 5 years old, so I wasn't able to say anything at the time. But if somebody is so good and have so much good in their heart and willing to share good with everybody, nobody would never come to somebody's house and wake a 5-year-old child up out of her sleep, wiping her eyes, and look her daddy in the face and say, if that little big get up and use the bathroom, I'm gonna blow her head off. So if he's such a good person and he says that, yeah, everybody makes mistakes, but everybody's not a murderer. Nobody comes in somebody's house with their kids in their house, looking at them. The last face I saw was my dad telling me it's all right. I'll never see that face again. So do y'all understand? Can y'all understand how they would feel? My birthday's on the 21st, my dad's birthday's on the 22nd. So every year I celebrate, I can't celebrate. Why am I celebrating when he's not here? So when y'all make y'all decision, please think of us, because nobody else is. We only thinking of ourselves. And we're trying to keep my dad's name alive, because he was not a mistake. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Evans?
You know, she had to never talk about her husband. What about my husband? My husband is never returning here. He is never. My children, I have to raise them by myself. He was here with me. We was married for, we had just made 12 years. My husband was my first love and my best friend. And when he came into our home and murdered my husband, he took everything from me, everything. My husband did not divorce me to be a single parent. He was murdered and I was made a single parent. And it was hard. Being a single parent is hard. My husband was a very good husband. He was a good father. Everything. Was everything to me. When my husband was murdered, a part of me went with him and it would never return. His family could see him. His family could talk to him. His family could hug him. His family could do it. We can never do it. Once a life is taken, there's no mistake. It's no mistake because you cannot bring their life back. Everybody have choices. He came to our home that night. He had a choice to say, stop this car, let me out. I'm not going to do that. He chose to do that. He chose to come inside our home and murder my husband. 2023, okay. They said that he had changed. September 14, 1994. Me and my children life changed and our life changed forever. Forever. Is God gonna tell my husband that he done spent enough time with him, he can come back home to his family. No. So when God tell my husband that he done spent enough time with him, that he could come back home to his family, that's when he should be able to go home to his. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Romero?
Yeah, this is one of those cases where I was with his family early that morning after Kevin was murdered. And I remember standing in Stephanie's driveway, and it's crazy that I was with them on the worst day of their life. Kayla was 5 and Kevin said he was 10. And when I walked in this morning and saw Kevin Jr., it took my breath away because he is a mirror image of his father. It's just wow. And so here I am with them today on where I'm going to take the privilege of saying it's probably the second worst day of their life. And days that have happened between then and now, Stephanie is such a strong woman. And she and I had a very long talk Friday, and she has had a lot of joy in her life with grandkids and with her children and Kevin Jr.'s wife. But it's all been without Kevin, Senior, her husband. And I know the position the members of this board are in today. Mr. Roche, I rarely disagree with you, but I have to say that I don't think he should get involved in what happened in 2017, because it was after he had taken all his classes, and he keeps talking about what a changed man he is. But again, in that incident, he had the opportunity to say no and to step away, but he didn't. And I think my biggest fear right now is that we will recommend this to the governor, and the governor will grant it, and Brian Berry will live in East Baton Rouge Parish. And Kayla and Kevin Jr. and Stephanie will bump into something somewhere. And I know when he comes up before the board, if he does for pardon hearing, it will be explained to him that you see his family, you have to turn away, but you still can't get over the fear that will be in their lives of seeing him. And so, of course, I stand here before you, I stand with the family and ask that you deny his request for commutation. And if it does come to fruition, just cannot bear the thought of living here in East Baton.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Berry, before we turn it over to Ms. Lubin, is there anything you'd like to say to the board?
Yes, ma'am. I want to thank this board first for the opportunity to speak. I respectfully ask this board to consider the man that I am today. I am no longer the person that committed these selfish and senseless crimes. I was wrong, and I'm deeply remorseful for the taking of Mr. Evans' life and for the hurt and the pain that I've caused the Evans family. I couldn't change and I can't change my past, but I've been afforded this opportunity to take classes to straighten myself out as a person, that my actions will never allow there to be another victim. I want to thank everybody that came to support me. I want to show my remorse once again for the Evans family. And I ask this board for mercy.
Sorry, Ms. Lubin?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Berry is a calm, thoughtful, and giving man. He is now 51 and very far from the 22-year-old who committed this crime. At that time, he had gone through a turbulent childhood. He was in 9th grade and repeated it 3 times before dropping out. He made poor choices and involved himself in crime instead of applying himself to his studies. And then he made the choice to join in this robbery, and led to these tragic events. And to address his behavior, to change that mindset, that follower mindset, into who he is today. And in the Returning Hearts program in 2003, was when he really realized the full impact of what he had done as he was there with his dog. He truly saw the full scope of his actions and committed himself to being a better person. As you heard, he's committed to a life of service to others. He is on the Angola CPR team and responds to medical emergencies. He's a club in order to give back to others, as well as with his church, to distribute hygiene items to people on the ward and to help in any way he can. He's a Class A trustee. Since the 2017 incident, he was baptized following being inspired by Pastor George's classes, including Thinking for Change, Inside Outside Dad, Victim Awareness, and the Victim Accountability Letter training. He realizes that he made a mistake in 2017, and he took accountability for that and worked his way back to his trustee status. And he has taken accountability for this, for what he has done, and understands that even though he was not the person who pulled the trigger, he was involved and he bears responsibility as well for this act. And he has a solid reentry plan with the parole project and with his family. He has a large support system, and I ask this board to recommend that Mr. Berry's sentence be commuted.
All right, thank you. All right, I think we're prepared to vote.
I'd like to move for an executive session, Madam Chair.
We have a motion for executive session. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Marabella. Is there any objection? Hearing none, we'll be in executive session for a few moments to discuss confidential matters. All right, we're back in regular session and we are prepared to vote. Mr. Roche will be voting first.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, fellow board members. I guess I'm going to use the example of the scale of justice. The scale of justice, as far as I'm concerned today, sort of evened out. You committed a horrible crime. The victims of this crime is still mentally, physically, and emotionally affected by this crime, and they will be for the rest of their lives. It's unexcusable what you participated in. At any time during the process, you could have said no and left and found a way back to New Orleans. You didn't have to do this. The last 29 years, you've saved lives. You've CPR. You've done community service. You've taken excellent programs. I think you've done everything you could do to rehabilitate yourself. I had that on one hand, and a family who's still traumatized by someone at 4 o'clock in the morning honking a horn, who said that the husband went outside to see if he didn't know exactly who was honking a horn. And as the victim's advocate, the person who is supposed to keep the victim in the process, and based upon your age, only 51 years old, and you'll get another opportunity. But today, because of victim opposition. Opposition from law enforcement. And a very, very strong opposition from the DA's office. And we had the first assistant DA who actually worked the scene of the crime the morning of September 14th, 1994. My vote, based on adamant opposition from all parties, is to deny your request.
Mr. Marabella.
Mr. Barry, you've accomplished a lot while you've been in prison. You did mess up in 2017, and that was a serious mess up. It tells me that at that time, the rules didn't matter to you. They didn't matter to you. The crime was horrible. All crimes that we have here before us. I've listened to the family of the victims. I've listened to what you experienced, what you caused, what you and your friends caused them that night. Your criminal history bothers me. As a juvenile, you have an extensive history. As an adult, I don't think you led into this. I think you knew what you were doing. However, you've done a lot of things since you've been in prison. You've accomplished a lot. You've got support from family. I'm going to take a chance on. My vote would be to recommend to the governor that he commute your sentence to 99 years.
Mr. Freeman.
These cases are so tough, and to think about it. And I sat here and I listened to the victims talk. And there's no doubt you affected their lives now, and you could affect their lives for the rest of their lives. I just today don't feel like 28, 29 years is enough. My vote is to deny.
Mrs. Jackson.
Mr. Berry, this is a very difficult case. I'll be honest with you. They all were difficult. You were convicted as a principal. Legally, you equally are as guilty as the person who actually fired the shots, killed the victim. But in reality, you did not do that. You were not the one who actually took the next step, killed the victim. You were part of the activity. But as I look at the last 29 years, you have done well. You've worked hard on yourself, and not only that, you've helped others. And I don't discount in any way the impact this crime has had on the victim's family. I don't discount that at all. But I also have to look at it, as Mr. Roche said, it's a balance of scales. And I have to also look at what you've done and the things that you've done for yourself, and the fact that you did not actually kill the victim causes me to agree with colleague to recommend a commutation sentence to 19 years.
All right, so you've got a split vote today, Mr. Berry. I'll say this, I'm disappointed in the serious rule infraction in 2017. It tells me a little bit about your the way you think. about the rules. That was a serious infraction, security threat. And based on that, I just don't think today's the day for you. I think your day's coming, but it's not today for you. So my vote today also is to deny. So you've received 2 favorable votes, but you've received 3 votes to deny your application. So today your application's been denied, sir. Good luck.
Yes, ma'am.